Students. So in our next lesson, we're going to be moving on to the developments leading up to the Civil War in America. The first major event that we're going to focus on is the Missouri Compromise of 1820. In our objectives for this lesson, we are going to describe the state of U.S. politics during the early 19th century with particular focus on the North-South divide. We're going to analyze the role of slavery in the U.S. economic system during the early 19th century. We're going to define the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Let's first look at the vocabulary. We have two words, Missouri and compromise. We know Missouri is a place, it's one of our 50 states. Compromise, well, let's look that up on Google. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type it into the search engine. Compromise. Let's see what we get. So what we see is a compromise is an agreement or settlement of a dispute that is reached by each side making concessions. So in this case, who are the two sides that make concessions for the Missouri Compromise? Well, we're looking at both the northern states in the United States Congress and the southern states in the United States Congress coming to an agreement over how to include new states. Now, we all tend to make compromises in our lives. It wasn't just applicable to the United States Congress in 1820. We're basically looking at what do you want versus what do they want. And our compromise is the common ground in the middle where we find what we both need. Now let's next look at the word Missouri. So we know Missouri is a place, but where is this place? So let's pull it up on Google Maps. We can see there's this pin sort of in the middle of the United States. And if we zoom in further, we'll see it's sort of towards the Midwest, states like Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Kansas. Now at the time of the Missouri Compromise, Missouri wasn't yet a state. In fact, it was a much larger territory that included much of what is to the north and west of what we know as the state of Missouri. All of this territory was acquired for the United States in the Louisiana Purchase from Spain. Whoops, did I say from the Spanish? It was from the French. The Louisiana territories had gone back and forth between French and Spanish control. And in 1803, when the French had control of it, they sold it to the United States. Now, the Missouri Compromise was not the first compromise between northern and southern states. Initially, in the drafting of the Constitution, our founding fathers had to decide, well, how do we split control between states that are in favor of slavery or states that are anti-slavery, as well as other concerns? So one of these first compromises we see is in the Connecticut Compromise, also known as our Great Compromise or the Sherman Bill, which created two houses for our Congress. We have a Senate and a House of Representatives. The delegates in each of these two houses are selected differently. It gave relatively equal power to less populated southern states and more populated northern states. The compromise gave two representatives to every state in the Senate. Another compromise was the 3/5 compromise. In this compromise, slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of delegating representatives. This gave more benefits to the southern states because they had a large number of slaves, and it sort of outweighed the population concerns that the southerners had over the northern states. A final compromise was that the state representatives agreed that the issue of slavery would be shelved until at least 1808, at which time Congress would have the authority to ban the slave trade. But even then, after 1808, it did not resolve the issue of slavery as a whole. Could slaves still be purchased on the open market, or did this abolish slavery entirely? This wouldn't be resolved until the Civil War. So what did the Missouri Compromise do? Well, by 1800, there were a near equal number of slave states and free states. This balance for any new state admitted needed to be maintained to hold the country together. And so by the time of the Missouri Compromise, around 1820, an agreement was made that Missouri would be admitted to the Union as a state, but in the future, all future states that came from this Louisiana Purchase above the 36th parallel would be considered free. Additionally, at the same time that Missouri was admitted, Maine would be admitted as a free state. It was actually broken off from the state of Massachusetts and given its independence. So for our next class period, before we start our class, have written down, what do you think? Was this Missouri Compromise a good compromise? Were the earlier compromises from the founding of our country good compromises? Do you agree that the balance between northern states and southern states should have been maintained? Is it always worthwhile to compromise?